The invitation to my brother-in-law's wedding arrived on a Tuesday, tucked inside a thick, cream-colored envelope with gold foil edges and a wax seal stamped with the family crest. I remember the way my wife, Julia, handed it to me, her eyes bright, her smile just a little too wide. "It's from my brother Alex. The wedding's at the Grand Monarch downtown. It's going to be the event of the year." I opened the envelope, feeling a strange mix of anticipation and dread. Julia's family had always been a little too polished, a little too proud of their old money and their social connections. I'd spent years trying to fit in, to prove that I was more than just the quiet businessman Julia had married. I read the invitation, noting the elegant script, the list of events, the RSVP card with my name already printed. For a moment, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, I was finally being accepted. But that illusion shattered 2 days later when Julia came home with a different kind of smile, a tight, apologetic one. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, her hands folded, her voice careful. "There's been a change of plans. Alex and his fiancée want to keep the wedding small, just family. They're asking if you'd mind sitting this one out." I stared at her, the words sinking in like stones. "I'm not family?" She looked away, her cheeks flushing. "It's not like that. It's just, you know how my parents are. They want everything perfect. No drama, no outsiders." I felt a wave of humiliation, then anger. I thought about the years I'd spent supporting Julia, the countless times I'd hosted her family at my hotels, the business deals I'd brokered for her father, the quiet ways I'd made her life easier, and now I was being uninvited from the biggest event in her family's life, at a hotel I owned. Julia didn't know that, of course. She'd never asked about the details of my bus. Ines never cared to understand how I'd built my own fortune. The Grand Monarch was the crown jewel of my portfolio, acquired quietly through a holding company, its management team loyal to me and me alone. I took a deep breath, forcing a smile. "Of course, Julia, if that's what your family wants." She looked relieved, kissed my cheek and hurried off to call her mother. I sat at the table, my mind racing. I could feel the old instincts kicking in, the ones I'd learned from my grandfather, who built his empire from nothing, who taught me that respect was earned, not given. I picked up my phone and called my assistant, Marcus. "I need a list of all bookings for the Grand Monarch next month, and I want to know exactly who's handling the wedding arrangements for the Bennett family." Marcus didn't ask questions. He knew that tone in my voice. "Right away, sir." I hung up, my mind already working through the possibilities. If Julia's family wanted to play games, they were about to learn who really held the keys to the kingdom. If you enjoy powerful stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. I poured myself a glass of whiskey, sat down at my desk, and began to plan. The first move was theirs. The next would be mine. The next morning, I woke early, the city still wrapped in a grey hush, and found Marcus's email waiting in my inbox. He'd attached a full breakdown of the Bennett wedding. Every suite reserved, every ballroom booked, every vendor contract signed. I scrolled through the guest list, noting the names of Julia's parents, her cousins, her childhood friends, and of course Julia herself. Her name at the top of the bridal party, her suite reserved for the entire week. My own name was nowhere to be found. I felt a cold satisfaction as I read the details. the rehearsal dinner in the Monarch's rooftop garden, the spa day for the bridal party, the black tie reception in the grand ballroom. I called Marcus. "Who's the main contact for the event?" He replied, "It's Julia's mother, Mrs. Bennett. She's been in touch with our events director, but all the payments are coming from Julia's father's company." I nodded, making notes. "And the contract?" Marcus hesitated. "There's a clause that allows the hotel to cancel or modify any event if the client violates the terms of service or fails to pay on time. Standard, but it gives us leverage." I smiled, feeling the first stirrings of a plan. "Good. I want you to flag every Bennett family reservation for my review. If there are any issues, I want to know immediately. And make sure the staff knows to treat the family with the utmost courtesy, but to report any unusual requests directly to me." Marcus agreed, his voice steady. "Understood, sir." I spent the rest of the morning walking the halls of the Grand Monarch, greeting staff, inspecting suites, and making mental notes of every detail. I stopped by the events office, where the team was assembling welcome baskets for the guests. Champagne, chocolates, handwritten notes. I picked up one of the cards, reading the message. "Welcome to the Bennett wedding. We are honored to host your family's special day." I slipped the card into my pocket, thinking about the irony. I made my way to the rooftop garden where the rehearsal dinner would be held. The view was spectacular. City lights stretching to the horizon, the river winding through the skyline. I imagined Julia and her family toasting to their perfect event, never realizing who had made it all possible. I called the head chef, asking him to prepare a special menu for the dinner. A family recipe from my childhood, a subtle reminder of the roots Julia's family had tried so hard to erase. He agreed, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "It will be our secret, sir." That afternoon, I reviewed the vendor contracts, looking for any weaknesses, any loopholes I could use if things got ugly. I found one, a clause that allowed the hotel to require full payment in advance for any event involving more than 50 guests. I highlighted it, feeling a surge of satisfaction. I spent the evening in my office, drafting a plan, mapping out every move, every contingency. I knew the Bennetts would never see me coming, and I knew that when the time was right, I would show them exactly who owned the Grand Monarch and who owned the story of their perfect wedding. As the sun set, I poured myself a glass of whiskey, sat by the window and watched the city lights flicker on. The air was cool, the sky clear. I knew the storm was coming, but I was ready. This time, I was playing by my rules. The days leading up to the wedding were a masterclass in silent, strategic payback. I watched as Julia's family swept into the Grand Monarch, their arrival a parade of designer luggage, tailored suits, and brittle smiles. Julia's mother, Eleanor, took command of the lobby, issuing instructions to the staff with the air of a general. I observed from a distance, blending in with the senior management team, my presence unnoticed. Every morning I reviewed the daily reports Marcus sent me, the spa appointments, the room service bills, the mounting list of urgent requests from the Bennetts. I made sure every request was met with flawless service, but also that every extra charge was documented and billed immediately. The staff, loyal to me, kept me informed of every complaint, every whispered insult about the help, every time Julia's father tried to slip a tip to get around hotel policy. I instructed Marcus to enforce the advance payment clause for the rehearsal dinner, citing the guest count and the high-profile nature of the event. Eleanor balked at first, but when Marcus explained that it was standard policy for all major events, she relented, grumbling about American bureaucracy. The payment arrived the next day, a wire transfer from the Bennett Family Trust. I smiled as I signed off on the receipt, knowing that every dollar was now under my control. On the day of the rehearsal dinner, I walked the rooftop garden, inspecting every table, every flower arrangement, every place card. I made sure the chef's special menu was ready, the wine perfectly chilled, the staff briefed on every detail. As the guests arrived, I watched from the shadows, noting the way Julia glowed in the candlelight, her laughter a little too loud, her eyes darting to the empty seat at her side. My seat. I felt a pang of sadness, but also a deep sense of resolve. I was not going to beg for a place, at a table I owned. Instead, I made my way to the events office, where I reviewed the final checklist for the wedding day. I noticed a last-minute request from Eleanor, a private suite for the bridal party, stocked with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. I approved it, but instructed the staff to require a credit card on file for any additional charges. That evening, as the dinner wound down, I received a text from Marcus. The Bennetts are requesting a late-night extension for the rooftop. They want to keep the party going until 2 a.m. I replied, approve it, but bill them double for the extra hours, and make sure security is tight. No uninvited guests. I spent the rest of the night in my suite, listening to the distant sounds of music and laughter drifting up from the garden. I thought about Julia, about the woman I'd married, the woman who had chosen her family's approval over my dignity. I wondered if she would ever realize what she'd lost. As I drifted off to sleep, I knew that the real show was just beginning, and that I was ready for every twist, every betrayal, every moment of silent, strategic payback. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, the city sparkling beneath a cloudless sky. I arrived at the Grand Monarch early, dressed in a tailored suit, my presence as unassuming as ever. The lobby was a hive of activity, florists carrying armfuls of white lilies, musicians tuning their instruments, the events team moving with quiet efficiency. I walked the halls, greeting staff, checking in with Marcus, and reviewing the final checklist for the day. Every detail was perfect, every contingency planned. I made my way to the bridal suite where Julia and her mother were getting ready. I paused outside the door, listening to the laughter and the clink of champagne glasses. I heard Julia's voice, bright and brittle, as she reassured her mother that everything would be perfect. I felt a pang of regret, but I pushed it aside. This was her choice, her family, her world. I was just the man who owned the building. I spent the next hour in the events office, monitoring the security feeds and reviewing the guest list. I noticed a last-minute addition, a distant cousin from London added by Eleanor without notifying the hotel. I instructed the front desk to require ID and a credit card for all new arrivals, no exceptions. At noon, the first guests began to arrive, their cars pulling up to the red carpet, their laughter echoing through the marble foyer. I watched from the shadows as Julia's father greeted each guest, his smile wide, his handshake firm. I saw Julia's brother, Alex, the groom, pacing nervously in the lobby, his best man at his side. I made my way to the ballroom where the ceremony would be held. The room was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers, gold-trimmed chairs, an aisle lined with roses. I checked the sound system, the lighting, the seating chart. Everything was in place. As the ceremony began, I stood at the back of the room, unnoticed by the guests. I watched, cheered as Julia walked down the aisle, her dress shimmering in the sunlight, her eyes shining with tears. I saw the pride in her mother's face, the relief in her father's. I saw the joy in Alex's eyes as he took his bride's hand, and I felt nothing but a quiet, cold satisfaction. I was not part of this family, not part of this celebration. I was the architect of their perfect day, the invisible hand that made it all possible. As the ceremony ended and the guests moved to the reception, I slipped away to my suite, where Marcus was waiting with an update. The Bennetts have requested a last-minute change to the menu. Lobster instead of chicken for the head table. The chef says it's possible, but it will cost extra. I smiled. Approve it, but bill them triple, and make sure every charge is documented. Marcus grinned. Already done, sir. That evening, as the reception began, I watched from the balcony as the guests danced and laughed, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath the surface. I knew that the real drama was yet to come, and that when it did, I would be ready. As the reception unfolded in the Grand Monarch's glittering ballroom, I watched from the shadows, every sense attuned to the undercurrent swirling beneath the surface. The band played a waltz, the guests twirled beneath the chandeliers, and Julia's family basked in the glow of their own perfection. I moved quietly through the service corridors, checking in with the kitchen, the security team, and the event staff. Every detail was running like clockwork, but I could feel the tension building. At the head table, Julia sat beside her mother, her smile fixed, her eyes scanning the room for approval. Alex, the groom, laughed with his friends, oblivious to the drama simmering just out of sight. I noticed Eleanor whispering to the maitre d', her voice sharp, as she demanded more champagne, more flowers, more attention. I signaled to Marcus, who nodded and made a note to bill every extra request at a premium. As the evening wore on, the Bennetts' demands grew bolder. They insisted on a second dessert course, a late-night snack buffet, and a private after-party in the rooftop lounge. I approved every request, knowing that each one tightened the financial noose around their necks. The staff, loyal to me, documented every change, every signature, every charge. At midnight, as the after-party began, I received a call from the front desk. Sir, Mrs. Bennett's credit card has been declined. She's asking to put the charges on the hotel's corporate account. I smiled, my voice calm. Decline the request. Inform her that all charges must be settled before checkout, as per the contract. The front desk manager relayed the message, and within minutes, Eleanor stormed into the lobby, her face flushed with anger. She demanded to speak to the owner. I stepped forward, introducing myself with a polite smile. Good evening, Mrs. Bennett. I'm the owner of the Grand Monarch. How can I help you? She stared at me, stunned, her mouth opening and closing in disbelief. You? But Julia never said. I kept my tone gentle but firm. I'm sorry for any confusion, but as per our contract, all charges must be paid in full before your family checks out. She sputtered, her composure slipping. This is outrageous. We are the Bennets. We have never been treated this way." I nodded, my expression sympathetic. "I understand, Mrs. Bennet, but these are the hotel's policies. I'm sure you'll find a way to resolve the matter." She stormed off, her heels clicking angrily on the marble floor. I watched her go, feeling a surge of satisfaction. The trap was closing, and Julia's family was finally beginning to realize who truly held the power. As the party wound down and the guests drifted off to their suites, I returned to my office, reviewing the final invoices and making sure every charge was accounted for. I poured myself a glass of whiskey, sat back in my chair, and waited for the morning, knowing that the real reckoning was yet to come. The morning after the wedding, the Grand Monarch was a study in contrasts. The sunlight streaming through the tall windows, the scent of fresh coffee and croissants wafting from the kitchen, and the unmistakable tension that hung in the air as the Bennet family began to realize the consequences of their extravagance. I arrived early, dressed in a crisp suit, and made my way to the executive lounge, where Marcus was already waiting with a stack of invoices and a nervous smile. "They've racked up more than double the original estimate, sir. The after-party, the extra suites, the last-minute spa treatments, every charge is documented, every signature is on file." I nodded, reviewing the numbers. "And the payment?" Marcus shook his head. "Mrs. Bennet's card is still declined. Mr. Bennet tried to use a company account, but the bank flagged it for suspicious activity. They're asking for an extension." I smiled, feeling the satisfaction of a well-laid plan. "No extensions. Remind them of the contract. Full payment before checkout, or we reserve the right to hold their belongings and notify the vendors." Marcus left to deliver the message, and I watched from the mezzanine as the Bennets gathered in the lobby, their voices rising in panic and frustration. Eleanor argued with the front desk manager, her face red, her gestures wild. Julia's father paced back and forth, making frantic phone calls, while Alex and his new wife looked on in stunned silence. Julia stood apart from the chaos, her eyes meeting mine for the first time in days. There was a flicker of recognition, then something like regret. I walked over, my tone gentle. "Good morning, Julia. I hope you enjoyed the wedding." She stared at me, her voice barely above a whisper. "You own the hotel?" I nodded. "For the past 2 years. I wanted to surprise you, but I never thought it would be like this." She looked away, tears brimming in her eyes. "Why didn't you tell me?" I shrugged, my voice soft. "You never asked." As the Bennets' panic grew, I met with the hotel's legal counsel, reviewing the contract one last time. Every clause was airtight, every charge justified. I instructed the staff to prepare itemized bills for each guest, and to inform the vendors that payment would be released only when the Bennets settled their account. By noon, the family was in full meltdown. Eleanor threatened to call the press, to sue the hotel, to ruin my reputation. I listened patiently, then handed her a copy of the contract, highlighting the relevant clauses. "You agreed to these terms, Mrs. Bennet. If you have any concerns, I suggest you consult your lawyer." She glared at me, defeated. Julia approached me later, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry, I didn't know. I never wanted this." I placed a hand on her shoulder. "It's not your fault, Julia, but sometimes people need to learn the hard way who really holds the keys." That evening, as the Bennets scrambled to gather funds, I sat in my office, watching the city lights and reflecting on the silent, strategic payback I'd orchestrated. The legal trap had closed, and for the first time I felt the weight of years of humiliation and exclusion lift from my shoulders. The reckoning was here, and I was ready for whatever came next. The afternoon sun slanted through the Grand Monarch's lobby as the Bennett family's desperation reached its peak. I watched from the executive lounge as Eleanor, her composure unraveling, pleaded with the front desk manager for more time. Her voice, once so commanding, now trembled with panic. "You don't understand. We're good for it. We just need a few days. My husband's accountant is wiring the funds." The manager, trained to be polite but firm, shook his head. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Bennett. Hotel policy is clear. All charges must be settled before checkout. If payment is not received by 5 p.m., we will have to notify the vendors and hold your belongings as collateral." Julia's father, red-faced and sweating, paced the marble floor, his phone pressed to his ear as he argued with the bank. Alex, the groom, sat slumped in an armchair, his new wife in tears beside him, the dream of a perfect honeymoon slipping away with every passing minute. I made my way to the lobby, my steps measured, my expression calm. Julia saw me first, her eyes wide with a mix of shock and something like admiration. She hurried over, her voice low. "Please, can't you do something? My mother is falling apart. Alex is furious. This is supposed to be the happiest day of his life." I looked at her, my tone gentle but unyielding. "Julia, I warned you. Your family made their choices. They signed the contract. They excluded me from your brother's wedding. In my own hotel, I can't change the rules for them." She bit her lip, tears brimming in her eyes. "I'm sorry, I didn't know it would be like this." I nodded, my heart aching for her, but I knew I couldn't back down. At 4:30 p.m., Marcus approached me with an update. "No payment yet, sir. The vendors are getting anxious. The florist is threatening to remove the centerpieces. The caterer says he'll cancel the evening's dinner if he's not paid by 5. I nod, dead, my mind racing through every contingency. "Let them know we're prepared to release payment as soon as the Bennetts settle their account. No exceptions." As the clock ticked toward 5, the tension in the lobby was palpable. Guests whispered, staff moved with nervous energy, and the Bennetts huddled in a corner, their perfect facade crumbling. At 4:55, Julia's father finally managed to arrange a wire transfer, the funds arriving just minutes before the deadline. The front desk manager confirmed receipt, and the vendors were paid in full. The crisis was averted, but the damage was done. The Bennetts' humiliation was complete, their reputation in tatters. As the family gathered their belongings and prepared to leave, Eleanor approached me one last time, her voice barely above a whisper. "You did this, didn't you?" I met her gaze, my expression unreadable. "I simply enforced the rules, Mrs. Bennett, the same rules that apply to everyone." She stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked away. Her shoulders slumped in defeat. Julia lingered, her eyes searching mine. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." I nodded, watching as she joined her family, the lesson learned at last. That night, as I walked the empty halls of the Grand Monarch, I felt a sense of closure. The legal trap had sprung, the payback delivered, not with anger or violence, but with dignity, evidence, and the quiet power of a man who knew his worth. The days after the wedding were a study in aftermath. The Grand Monarch returned to its usual rhythm, but the echoes of the Bennet family's humiliation lingered in every corner. Staff whispered about the wedding that almost wasn't, and vendors sent thank you notes for the hotel's professionalism and fairness. I made a point to personally thank every member of my team, rewarding those who had handled the crisis with grace and discretion. Meanwhile, Julia's family retreated from the public eye, their social calendar suddenly empty. The society pages, always hungry for scandal, ran a discreet but unmistakable story. Prominent family's wedding nearly cancelled over unpaid bills, saved by last-minute wire. I clipped the article and filed it away, a quiet reminder of the power of evidence and boundaries. Julia called me a few days later, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "Dad, I just wanted to say thank you. I know you could have made things much worse for us. You could have exposed everything. But you didn't." I listened, letting her words settle. "Julia, I never wanted to hurt you. I just wanted your family to see me, not as an outsider, but as someone who deserved respect." She was silent for a moment, then said, "I see you now. I'm sorry it took so long." We talked for a while, about the wedding, about her brother's new marriage, about the future. She confessed that she'd felt trapped between loyalty to her family and love for me, that she'd been afraid to stand up for herself. I thought if I just went along, things would get better, but I see now that sometimes you have to draw a line. I told her I was proud of her, that I hoped she'd remember this lesson for the rest of her life. That evening, I met with Marcus and the hotel's legal team to review the final paperwork. Every charge was accounted for, every contract fulfilled, every signature in place. The Grand Monarch's reputation had not only survived the ordeal, it had been strengthened. Vendors now saw us as a fortress of fairness and integrity, and new clients were already inquiring about bookings. As I walked through the empty ballroom, the scent of roses still lingering in the air, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. I had won, not with anger or revenge, but with patience, evidence, and the quiet confidence of a man who knew his own worth. The Bennets would recover in time, but they would never forget the lesson they'd learned at my hotel. And neither would Julia. As I turned out the lights and locked the doors, I knew that the story of the wedding would be told for years to come, not as a tale of scandal, but as a testament to the power of silent, strategic payback. A week after the wedding, the Grand Monarch was hosting a charity gala, and the contrast with the Bennet affair could not have been starker. The ballroom was filled with laughter, music, and genuine warmth. No frantic demands, no whispered threats, no desperate attempts to save face. I moved through the crowd, shaking hands, exchanging pleasantries, and feeling the respect that comes from quiet authority. As the evening wore on, I found myself in a corner of the lounge, reflecting on everything that had happened. The staff approached me one by one, sharing stories of the wedding week, how they'd handled Eleanor's tantrums, how they'd kept the vendors calm, how they'd watched the Bennet family unravel under the weight of their own arrogance. I thanked them all, making a note to include bonuses in their next paychecks. Later that night, as I walked the empty halls, I received a call from Julia. She sounded different, lighter, more at peace. "Dad, I've been thinking a lot about what happened. I know it was hard for you, but I'm grateful you stood your ground. I've started seeing a counselor, and I'm working on setting boundaries with my family. I want to be better for myself and for you." I felt a surge of pride, my heart swelling with hope. I'm proud of you, Julia. Remember, you don't have to earn anyone's approval. You just have to be true to yourself. She laughed, a sound I hadn't heard in years. I'm learning, Dad. Slowly, but I'm learning. The next day I received a letter from the Bennett family's lawyer, a formal apology for the chaos they'd caused, and a promise to settle any outstanding debts with the hotel. I forwarded the letter to Marcus and the legal team, instructing them to close the file and move on. The chapter was over, but the lessons would last a lifetime. That weekend, I took a walk through the city, the autumn air crisp and clean. I stopped by a set, mall cafe, ordered a coffee, and watched the world go by. I thought about my grandfather, about the values he'd instilled in me: dignity, patience, the courage to stand up for what's right. I realized that the true victory wasn't in the public humiliation of the Bennetts, but in the quiet strength I'd found within myself. As I finished my coffee and headed home, I knew that the story of the wedding would fade with time, but the legacy of respect and resilience would endure. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly free. As autumn deepened, the city's rhythm returned to normal, but the echoes of the Bennett wedding lingered in subtle ways. The Grand Monarch's reputation soared. Vendors now recommended us as the gold standard for professionalism, and new clients booked months in advance, eager to avoid the drama that had nearly derailed the Bennett's event. I found myself busier than ever, but I made time for the things that mattered: long walks in the park, dinners with Julia, and quiet evenings spent reading by the fire. Julia's transformation was remarkable. She began to assert herself at work, taking on new projects and earning the respect of her colleagues. She distanced herself from her mother's constant demands, setting boundaries that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. One evening, she invited me to her apartment for dinner. The table was set with candles and fresh flowers, and she served a meal she'd cooked herself, simple, delicious, and full of love. As we ate, she told me about a new friend she'd met at her counseling group, a woman who had also struggled with family expectations and learned to stand on her own. We talk for hours, Dad. It's like I finally have someone who understands. I smiled, feeling a deep sense of relief. You're building your own life, Julia. That's all I ever wanted for you. After dinner, we sat on the balcony watching the city lights. Julia turned to me, her eyes shining. Do you ever regret what happened? The way you handled the wedding? I thought for a moment, then shook my head. No. I regret that it hurt you. But I don't regret standing up for myself. I don't regret showing your family that respect is earned, not given. She nodded, her expression thoughtful. I think I needed to see that. I think I needed to know that it's okay to say no. The next day, I received a letter from the hotel's board of directors congratulating me on the way I'd handled the Bennett affair. Your leadership has set a new standard for the Grand Monarch. We are proud to have you at the helm. I pinned the letter to my office wall. A quiet reminder of the power of silent, strategic payback. That weekend, Julia and I attended a small charity gala at the hotel. As we mingled with guests, I noticed Eleanor Bennett across the room. Her posture stiff, her smile brittle. She avoided my gaze, but I caught a glimpse of something like respect in her eyes. Later, as Julia and I walked home, she squeezed my hand. Thank you, Dad, for everything. I hugged her. knowing that the true victory was not in the headlines or the bank accounts, but in the quiet strength we'd found together. The story of the wedding was fading, but the lessons would last a lifetime. Winter crept into the city, bringing with it a hush that seemed to settle over everything. Even the Grand Monarch. The hotel's holiday decorations sparkled in the lobby, and the staff moved with a new confidence, proud of the reputation we'd earned. I spent my mornings reviewing contracts and my afternoons walking the halls, greeting guests and checking in with Marcus and the events team. One afternoon, as I was reviewing a new vendor proposal in my office, Julia arrived, her cheeks flushed from the cold. She carried a small box, wrapped in gold paper. "I wanted to give you this," she said, her voice soft. I opened the box to find a silver pen engraved with the words, "For the man who taught me to stand tall." I felt a lump in my throat as I hugged her. "Thank you, Julia. This means more than you know." We sat together, sipping tea and watching the snow fall outside. Julia told me about her latest project at work, how she'd negotiated a major deal on her own, refusing to let her boss take credit. "I used to be afraid to speak up," she admitted, "but now I know my worth." I smiled, pride swelling in my chest. "You've come a long way, Julia. I'm proud of you." That evening, we attended the hotel's annual holiday party. The ballroom was filled with laughter, music, and the scent of pine and cinnamon. I watched as Julia mingled with guests, her confidence shining. Eleanor Bennett was there too, her presence subdued. She approached me during the party, her voice low. "I wanted to thank you for how you handled everything. It was difficult, but I see now that it was necessary." I nodded, accepting her words without gloating. Sometimes the hardest lessons are the ones we need most. She smiled, a hint of humility in her eyes. "I hope we can move forward," I agreed, knowing that forgiveness was as much for me as it was for her. As the party wound down, Julia and I walked home through the snow, the city lights twinkling around us. She slipped her arm through mine. "I'm glad you're my father," she whispered. I squeezed her hand, feeling the warmth of her love and the quiet satisfaction of a battle well fought. The story of the wedding was now a memory, but the legacy of respect, dignity, and silent strategic payback would last forever. The new year brought a sense of renewal, but also a few unexpected challenges. The Grand Monarch was busier than ever, and I found myself fielding requests from high-profile clients who had heard about the hotel's no-nonsense approach to contracts and service. One morning, as I was reviewing a proposal for a celebrity wedding, Marcus entered my office with a troubled look. "Sir, we've received a letter from the Bennett's lawyer. They're contesting some of the charges from the wedding, claiming we overbilled for the after-party, the spa, and the late-night room service." I took the letter, reading it carefully. The claims were baseless, but I knew the Bennetts were desperate to save face. I called Evelyn, our legal counsel, and together we drafted a response. A detailed breakdown of every charge, every signature, every contract clause. We included security footage of Eleanor approving the extra services and emails from Julia's father authorizing the late-night extensions. "Send this to their lawyer and copy the board," I instructed. "If they want to go to court, we'll be ready." That afternoon, Julia stopped by my office, her face tense. "Dad, Mom's upset. She says you're being vindictive." I shook my head, my voice calm. I'm being fair, Julia. Your family signed the contracts. They made the choices. I'm just holding them accountable. She sighed, her shoulders slumping. I know, I just wish it didn't have to be so hard. I reached across the desk, taking her hand. Sometimes the hardest lessons are the ones we remember. Your family will be stronger for it, so will you. That evening, I received a call from the Bennett's lawyer. After reviewing our evidence, they agreed to drop the dispute and pay the remaining balance. I forwarded the email to Marcus and Evelyn, feeling a wave of relief. The legal war was finally over. Julia and I celebrated with dinner at her F.A. Vorit restaurant, laughing and reminiscing about the year's ups and downs. As we walked home through the city, she turned to me, her eyes shining. Thank you for never giving up, Dad, for teaching me that respect is worth fighting for. I hugged her, knowing that the true victory was not in the courtroom, but in the quiet strength we'd found together. The story of the wedding was now a legend at the Grand Monarch, a tale of dignity, evidence, and the power of silent, strategic payback. Spring arrived with a gentle rain, washing away the last traces of winter and bringing a sense of hope to the city. The Grand Monarch was in full bloom, the rooftop garden bursting with tulips and cherry blossoms, and the staff moved with a new sense of pride. I spent my mornings walking the grounds, greeting guests, and checking in with Marcus, who had become not just my assistant, but a trusted friend. One afternoon, as I was reviewing a new contract in the lounge, Julia arrived with a smile that was brighter than I'd seen in years. She wore a simple dress, her hair loose around her shoulders, and she carried a folder filled with sketches and notes. Dad, I have an idea, she said, her eyes shining. I want to start an event planning business, one that focuses on honesty, transparency, and real service. No more games, no more hidden fees. I want to help people have the kind of wedding or event that's about love, not status. I listened, pride swelling in my chest. That's a wonderful idea, Julia. You have the experience, the heart, and the vision, and you have my full support. We spent the afternoon brainstorming, mapping out her business plan, and discussing potential clients. I offered her a space in the Grand Monarch to launch her company, and she accepted with gratitude. Over the next few weeks, Julia threw herself into her new venture, meeting with vendors, designing marketing materials, and building a website. She recruited a small team of passionate, like-minded people. And soon her first clients began to arrive, couples who wanted something different, something real. The transformation in Julia was remarkable. She was confident, decisive, and full of joy. She no longer sought her family's approval, no longer feared their judgment. She had found her own path, and she walked it with grace. One evening, as we sat on the rooftop garden, watching the sun set over the city, Julia turned to me, her voice soft. I never thought I'd be here, Dad. I never thought I'd have the courage to start over. I smiled, squeezing her hand. You earned this, Julia. You fought for it. And you taught me that sometimes the best revenge is living well. She laughed, her eyes shining with tears. Thank you for believing in me, for teaching me to believe in myself. As the city lights flickered on, I realized that the story of the wedding had become something more, a story of resilience, of growth, of the quiet power of dignity and evidence. The Bennetts were now a cautionary tale, but Julia and I were proof that even the deepest wounds could heal. And as I watched my daughter step into her new life, I knew that our legacy would outlast any scandal, any betrayal, any storm. Summer brought a new energy to the Grand Monarch, and with Julia's event business thriving, the hotel was busier than ever. I watched with pride as she orchestrated weddings, anniversaries, and charity galas, each one marked by her signature blend of elegance and authenticity. The staff adored her, the vendors respected her, and the clients raved about her attention to detail and her refusal to play the old social games. One afternoon, as I was reviewing quarterly reports in my office, Marcus entered with a look of quiet satisfaction. "Sir, you should see this." He handed me a glossy magazine, its cover story featuring Julia as one of the city's rising stars in hospitality. The article praised her integrity, her innovative approach, and her ability to turn even the most challenging events into unforgettable experiences. I clipped the article and added it to my growing file of reminders that the best revenge is success. That evening, Julia and I hosted a small dinner for her team on the hotel's rooftop. The air was warm, the city lights twinkled, and laughter filled the night. As the meal wound down, Julia stood to make a toast. "To my father, who taught me that dignity and evidence are stronger than any scandal. To my team, who prove every day that honesty is the best policy. And to the Grand Monarch, for giving us a home." The applause was genuine, the smiles real. After dinner, as we cleared the table, Julia confided in me, "I heard from Mum. She wants to meet for coffee. She says she's sorry for everything." I nodded, understanding the weight of that olive branch. "You should go, Julia. Forgiveness is a gift you give yourself." The next day, Julia met Eleanor at a quiet cafe. Their conversation was long and emotional, but when Julia returned, she was lighter, freer. She finally admitted she was wrong, Dad. She said she was proud of me. "I think she means it." I hugged her, knowing that the final piece of the puzzle had fallen into place. That weekend, Julia's business landed its biggest client yet. A tech CEO who wanted a wedding that was real, not ridiculous. Julia planned every detail, and the event was a triumph. The CEO's thank you note read, "You restored my faith in this industry." As I watched Julia celebrate with her team, I realized that the story of the wedding had come full circle. The Bennetts' arrogance had been replaced by humility, Julia's fear by confidence, and my own quiet pain by pride. The Grand Monarch stood as a testament to the power of boundaries, evidence, and silent strategic payback. And as the summer sun set over the city, I knew that our legacy was secure. As autumn returned, the city's golden leaves drifted down onto the steps of the Grand Monarch, and I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. The hotel was thriving, Julia's business was the talk of the town, and the wounds of the past had finally begun to heal. One crisp Saturday morning, Julia invited me to join her for a walk through the park. We strolled beneath the trees, the air filled with the scent of earth and the distant sound of children laughing. She told me about her latest project, a charity gala for survivors of family betrayal inspired by her own story. "I want to give back, Dad. I want people to know that you can come through the fire and still find joy." I squeezed her hand, pride swelling in my chest. "You're changing lives, Julia. You changed mine." That afternoon, we returned to the Grand Monarch, where Marcus greeted us with news. The hotel had just been named Best Luxury Venue in the region, and Julia's company had been booked solid for the next year. We celebrated with the staff, sharing stories and laughter late into the night. As the party wound down, Julia and I stood on the rooftop, looking out over the city. She turned to me, her eyes shining. "Do you ever regret how it all happened?" I thought for a moment, the memories of humiliation, exclusion, and silent payback flickering through my mind. "No," I said finally. "I regret that it hurt. But I don't regret standing up for myself. I don't regret teaching your family and you that respect is earned, not given. And I don't regret showing you that the best revenge is living well, loving deeply, and never letting anyone steal your dignity." She hugged me, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you, Dad, for everything." As the city lights twinkled below, I realized that the story of the wedding was no longer about betrayal or payback. It was about legacy, about the quiet strength that comes from knowing your worth, about the power of evidence, boundaries, and silent strategic action. The Bennets had faded into the background, their arrogance replaced by humility, their social standing forever changed. Julia had become a leader, a mentor, and a friend to those who needed hope. And I, at last, had found peace, not in victory over others, but in the knowledge that I had done what was right. As the first stars appeared in the autumn sky, I whispered a silent thank you to my grandfather, to the city, to the Grand Monarch, and to Julia. Our story was one of survival, of growth, of the kind of revenge that leaves no scars, only wisdom and the quiet joy of a life well lived.